There's going to be a lot of narrative that basically says today that this is about Trump. It's a referendum on Trump. Well, no, it wasn't. And you know how we know that? Because the voters told us in the exit polls.
Hello, and welcome to The Conversation. I'm Dasha Burns, Politico's White House bureau chief, and every week on this show, I invite one of the most compelling, sometimes unexpected power players in Washington and beyond in for a chat to find out how they're navigating and shaping this incredible era of American politics. This week, I caught up with James Blair. Blair is Trump's top politics guy. He was the political director for the campaign and the RNC in 2024 and was one of the architects of the strategy to turn out those low-propensity voters, which clearly worked. Now, his current role is White House Deputy Chief of Staff, but he came to talk to us in his personal capacity to talk politics. And boy, did we. We talked about all the takeaways from this week's election. What is going to mean for Republican strategy going forward? What is going to mean for the president's strategy going forward as he wants big wins for Republicans in 2026? Here's my conversation with James Blair. James Blair, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Good to be here.
I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for a while because you wear so many different hats. You're here today in your sort of personal capacity to talk politics, but of course, you are also Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House. And there's a lot to talk about today because we're coming off of a pretty big win for Democrats in the off-year election last night. I know that Republicans were hoping for closer races than what they saw. So today, what is the mood for Team Trump in the White House?
The mood's good. I mean, first of all, I don't think that there's anything that we personally didn't expect. We have a pretty good read on these races and what the numbers are, so there was nothing surprising. Put it that way. If it was really good night, we would have been surprised. So the good news is still when we look at our data and we think a certain thing, it's telling us the truth. So that's the good news. The bad news is obviously you would hope that things go better. But I think a lot of the conventional wisdom, as usual, that's going to come out of last night is incorrect. And I'm sure we will unpack that today. But overall, we feel good. If anything, I just tweeted about it on my way over here. I feel energized this morning. We're a year out. We got plenty of work to do. We know what the path is. We know what we need to do. It's really just about execution.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the narratives coming out of last night. One of them is something that actually President Trump posted online saying he was not on the ballot, right? He's never going to be on the ballot again. He said it, no attempt at a third term, right? So how big of a problem is that for Republicans then?
I think the question is the problem overcomable? And I think that with a lot of campaigning next year, with a lot of resources in the right districts for the right candidates, that is an overcomable problem. It's not abnormal for turnout to be down in an off year for a presidential party. I mean, the sort of general history of midterms is pretty simple. The party in power, the president's party's voters disengage, or a proportion of them disengage, and the opposition engages. So that's always been true. That's going to be true again, because generally, if you are a voter whose president is in power, you're relatively happy, you probably like what's going on generally, and the opposition is probably really upset and fired up. So you see that dynamic play out. So how do we overcome that? I think it's possible for sure.
Has last night, though, made you recalculate? Do you think he needs to be even more involved in the midterms now than you initially planned?
I don't think any more than we initially planned. I think he'll be far more involved in the midterms than he was in last night's races. Those are blue states. And again, we had a sense of where they were going. So we engaged, we're part of the team, but I think he'll invest much more. And he's, was saying that this morning, even on the sort of core midterm races. Look, in 2001, the Virginia and New Jersey governor's race went to Democrats, and who was in the White House and who had the trifecta. Well, actually, Republicans lost the trifecta in the Senate over the summer when the senator switched to independent, but they'd had it in 2000. And 2002, they added seats to both chambers. That was one of the only two times that's happened in the last 90 years for the president's party, the other being FDR in 1934. So
history lessons from James Blair.
I'm just saying the idea that this has never happened before. And by the way, Mark Warner won that governor's race, I think, by like 5 points, and the Jersey governor's race was probably like 15 points, and not that dissimilar in 2001. So yeah, we have to break the mold. That's sort of the truth about midterms. But you mentioned turning people out. Well, if you look at the exit polls, the Trump recall vote and in both Virginia and New Jersey is exactly the same point, as in not a point more, that the Republican candidates got. Now, that was about 5 points more left than those states were. So like 42% or something was the Trump recall vote in the exit polls, and that's who voted for the Republicans. The problem was Trump won those states. The Trump got closer to 47 in those states in 2024. So that shows you right there, there's a missing group.
Right.
in
And
the
in New
elect-
Jersey, especially, right? Those counties that Trump won where he gained a lot of ground
Yeah.
with voters. Those voters didn't show up for Jack Ciattarelli, even though Trump endorsed him and he did campaign
Well, there's some
very much aligned.
There's some
with the
people that
president.
didn't show up, but there's also people that shifted leftward, and it was a lot of those, frankly, skewing towards non-white voters, skewing towards younger voters. Those people that sort of came along with the president didn't come along, but you still have to win on the issues. I mean, it's not just simply Trump. So you also look at the exit polls. There's going to be a lot of narrative that basically says today that this is about Trump. It's a referendum on Trump. Well, no, it wasn't. And you know how we know that? Because the voters told us in the exit polls. If you look in New Jersey, about 40% of voters, and have it here just to double check my numbers. Let's see. In New Jersey, 40% of voters said their vote was a vote to oppose Donald Trump, and only 38% said that in Virginia. So less than 40% of voters last night said that their vote had something to do with opposing Donald Trump. Those are exit polls. More than half of voters saying it has nothing to do with that. So these are individualized races. Those are Democrats. There's, of course, a number of Democrats in the electorate, but you have to get more people to turn out. They're going to have to pull people along, and then they're going to have to persuade people that the president did, but Republicans, frankly, haven't.
Well, that brings me to another narrative that I'm hearing out of last night, and that is cost of living. It's very clear that the economy is top of mind for people. Some of those folks you mentioned that voted for Trump in 24 but moved leftward, they do cite the economy as a challenge. One close ally of the White House told me last night, quote, "People aren't feeling the promises kept. You won on lowering costs, putting more money back into people's pockets, and people don't feel that right now."
Let's talk about the economy and what's actually happening and how we look ahead, but let's first talk about the races. Again, let's go back to the exit polls. Fox News exit polls ask in both states, what is one issue that was most determinative in making your vote, right? And for like 42% of people, 48% of people in Virginia, it was the economy. And guess what? Spamberger won those voters like 61-39. Okay. And in New Jersey, it was about 32% the economy, and there was a segment on taxes. Jack won the taxes vote, but the number one issue on the economy also got beat almost 60-40.
So what's going on there, you think?
Well, for one, it's what you campaign on. So 75% of Mickey Sherrill's ads were positive, overwhelmingly talking about cost of living and heavily talking about lowering power costs. Jack didn't really talk about that. He talked about taxes, and he won the tax vote, but he didn't address those key issues of affordability very effectively. He was mostly talking generically about Change New Jersey, and I'm not denigrating Jack, but it was not in line necessarily with what voters were saying. Two, in Virginia, over half of Winsome Sears ads talked about transgender issues. And it's not even the top 5 issues, according to voters. Now, people say, well, what about you on the Trump campaign? You ran a famous trans ad. That was an economic ad that had a trans component. It specifically said that Democrats are giving transgender prisoners money. They're paying for this while you're getting hurt. It was really an economic ad. It was about what are we doing for you ad, with a transgender bent that pushed them to the left. These are nuanced but significant differences. Why did Zohran Mamdani do so well last night? He relentlessly focused on affordability. People can talk about communists, they can say all these things, but the fact is he was talking about the cost of living.
Folks that I'm talking to privately who are supporters of President Trump think that he needs to be talking about cost of living a whole lot more. Are we going to see that pivot?
I think you'll see the president talk a lot about cost of living as we turn the year and into the new year. The president is very keyed into what's going on, and he recognizes, like anybody, that it takes time to do an economic turnaround, but all the fundamentals are there. And I think you'll see him be very, very focused on prices and cost of living. But let's talk about where the economy actually is, if we could.
Can we stick on the politics of it?
Sure.
Because as you very well know, because we saw this during Biden's presidency, there were good economic indicators. There were also some poor economic indicators, but he was touting the good stuff.
Their economic indicators were false. We know that from the jobs revisions. People were feeling the reality of the job market.
But we know through the history of politics, the stock market is not something that indicates how Americans actually experience their economic reality.
It's actually not true. A group of Americans do experience it that way. We asked this question in our surveys. There is a group of people that basically track the stock market. That is different than the group of people who say the way they measure the economy. There's basically three ways, and it's different in the electorate. There's a group of people that measure the economy based on just sort of what stats say. At least that's what they tell us. Now, the truth is probably the number's not quite that high, but they at least generally follow the data. Then there's a group of people that say, what are my personal finances like at the end of the month? Okay. And then there's people that follow the stock market. They may have a 401k, they may have investments, they may have all of those things. And all three of those things are necessary to have sort of support from the electorate where you would want it to be economically.
I guess, do you worry, because some Republicans have raised this to me privately, that they're concerned that Trump might be falling into the problem that Biden had, which was talking very positively about the economy while a large segment of the American people did not feel like the economy was good for them?
I think the president is very not tone deaf, and the president will take all of the feedback from last night and he will calibrate what he emphasizes sort of rhetorically, very specifically. You've seen him do this before. He knows how to sort of use the dials and sort of communicating to voters what's going on and what he wants to do for them. But importantly, there's a difference between Biden. With Biden, inflation was actually surging. That was actually happening. We were actually seeing these giant price increases. So they were saying it wasn't happening, but it was. That's not true right now. Inflation is flat. It's been flat all year, to declining.
That still means prices are high for folks, though.
It's not that prices aren't high, it's that they're not rising. This is a substantial difference. And prices have come down on a lot of things. And we think a year from now, they're going to continue to come down. Gasoline was up over $4 a gallon. The national average just dipped under $3. We think that will continue to come down. My dad just texted me the other day. He said, please tell the president, thank you. I just paid $2.69 a gallon for gas. It's been a long time since I did that. Yeah, there still has to be time that takes hold. Two, people are going to get money back in their pocket. They're going to get tax cuts and they're going to feel these things in April. And guess what? Every Democrat on both sides of the aisle voted against 100% of those. So people are going to get money back in their pocket that they're not really aware of right now. And their withholding is going to change in January. They're going to see more money in their take-home pay as a result of that. So there's a lot of game to be played. This is just a moment in time. We're a year out.
One of the things that we heard from Trump allies last night is that candidate quality matters.
Of course it does.
Will we see Trump weigh in more aggressively in the GOP primaries? Now, I'm thinking specifically about Senate battles like Georgia and New Hampshire, where he hasn't backed a candidate yet.
I mean, I think the president will weigh into most primaries and major races at some point. I mean, he already has in the majority. You mentioned New Hampshire and Georgia, but he's already weighed in Michigan. He's already weighed in North Carolina. He has endorsed the majority of the House for re-election. So there's a couple races out there that are sort of still pending, but he's taken a much more aggressive stance in primaries, sort of helping pick opponents very closely in alignment with House leadership and Senate leadership and our grassroots folks. I mean, I talked to our friends at Turning Point USA yesterday about a candidate in a swing district. We're trying to sort of get everyone rowing in the same direction. It's the most coordinated the party's ever been, and I think that will pay dividends. So it's not 100% done yet. Again, we're a year out. But again, I think you'll see him very, very involved, particularly as we sort of wrap this year up.
I mean, I would say the midterms are starting today.
It's election season.
It's election season. I can smell it. I can smell it in the air. For you and the team who are thinking about midterm strategy, what are the red flags from last night, and what are the lessons learned that we're going to see implemented in the coming months?
Well, you can't get beat on the issue that's top of mind by 25 points and win, particularly not in a blue state. Like, that's just not going to be an option. And your communication have to align to where voters are and what they care about. So you might try to make the race about transgender issues, but if voters are talking about the economy, if 48% of voters say their number one issue is the economy, and you spend half of your powder on an issue that's not even in the top 5, it's just not going to work. I mean, that's fairly straightforward. Two, you have to motivate people. Yes, I think we will, work really hard, spend lots of money. The president will campaign a lot to get people out, but candidates still have to connect with those voters too. They have to bring these voters along who tilt right. Sort of, if you look at, we talked about this a lot on the campaign trail. You were there on the briefings. We talked about our persuadables and all of this. There's this group of people that tilt right, but they're not Republicans. A, they don't always vote because they don't think politics necessarily works for them. And B, they're not, an absolute lock. So we have to persuade those people further, and we have to turn them out. And candidates have to do their part in that too. It means connecting with them on the issues that matter. President Trump is very good at that. He's very good at giving people basically commitments of what he's going to do as president. So when someone walks into the voting booth, they know what they're getting with Donald Trump. And it's a very clear difference from what they're getting with the other guy or the other girl in last year's case. Republicans have to have that same contrast. To these voters who are not politically engaged per se, the question is, well, what difference does a Republican House of Representatives make to my life versus a Democrat House of Representatives? And that's what every candidate is going to have to offer. They're going to have to make a commitment. Here's the good news. We've made good on our commitments to those voters. So for one, we start with a baseline of trust. We have a baseline of trust with those people. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime pay, all of these things that we promised that those people really turned out on. The question then is, what are we going to do for them next? And you will hear me be a big proponent of, we cannot just campaign on our accomplishments. That's important. We have to tell people what we did, and they will feel it. But we also have to say, here's the reason to keep us in power. Here's why you need to vote Republicans back into office. Here's what we're going to do for you next.
Trump also blamed the shutdown for the big margins that we saw for Democrats last night. You guys had been saying all along through the shutdown that Americans are blaming Democrats. Does Trump's message mean that this is hurting Republicans more than expected?
Some Republicans were saying that we were definitely winning. I would tell you what the numbers roughly say is it's roughly split. It is roughly split. It is not heavily favored one party or another, the shutdown. And frankly, not that many people have followed it. Now, if this were a Republican-led shutdown, actually, it would be wall-to-wall news coverage. Every major outlet would have a ticker, how many days it's been and how close people are to death. But since it's a Democrat shutdown, the news has largely blocked it out as best they can.
I would push back on that. We've been, I do a daily playbook podcast, and we talk about the shutdown.
Well, this is you. I mean, you're obviously one of the smarter people because you have me here, obviously. But
take the compliment.
that's not true of mainstream cable. Cable has talked about it much less than they have in the past when Republicans run the shutdown. But that's not the point. The question is, the point the president is making is that the Democrats are just trying to obstruct. They are just trying to stop what's happening, and they're not going to change. And eventually, voters, don't necessarily know about 60 votes to pass something in the Senate. The very basic answer, which the Democrats have been obviously focusing on, is Republicans are in power. So why is the government closed?
Talking about 60 votes, you just came back from a breakfast at the White House with GOP senators. One of the things that the president has been pushing for is for them to go nuclear, to nix the filibuster. Is he moving the needle with any of them? What happened this morning, as far as you could tell us?
I don't think they had a family conversation, and I think they'll continue to have that conversation. Obviously, there's mixed feelings. I think the president's point is that the Democrats have shown that they're just going to be obstructionist. They have not given a single unanimous consent, which is, a Senate procedure where you functionally just agree to something altogether without going through the votes and all this different stuff on a nominee. Not a single one. That's never happened before in history. They have tried to block every single presidential nominee. Now, this isn't just stuff like ambassadors. This is like, the undersecretary of state for XYZ. This is the deputy administrator of the EPA. Real jobs. They have just tried to stop the Trump presidency in its tracks. And that is why ultimately Republicans changed the rules. And they said, we can't live like this. We have to be able to run the country.
So is that argument working? Are more people persuaded after the family chat today?
I mean, there was people in the room that were persuaded. I will ultimately leave it to the Senate to discuss it. But again, the president's just making the point that the Democrats have made very clear that they are not here to accomplish anything. They do not want to work with Republicans. They don't want to get anything done. They just want to essentially stop the Trump presidency and the Republican majority's agenda.
This is something that particularly Thune and Republican senators are very resistant to. And they want to have conversations this week with Democrats. They want to find another way out of this. After last night, do you worry at all that some Republican lawmakers may treat Trump as a lame duck right now?
Yeah, I don't think Republicans are going to do that at all. In fact, the spirit was very good in the room. The president, sort of has his way of communicating, but the senators have their way, and it's a family at the end of the day. And he was, it was a good conversation. I think that some senators cling to the days where the Democrats were normal people, and they wish we could go back to those days. But the Democrats lie. They're not the same people they used to be. I mean, Chuck Schumer has said 1,000 times publicly, you don't shut down the government for a debate about policy. And by the way, the country agrees with him. I mean, 70% of people agree with that statement when you poll the question. 10 years ago, Schumer was talking about the fact that we need to have control at the southern border, but all of them rolled over and let 20 million plus illegal immigrants come into the country under Biden. The Democrats have changed. And I think there's guys in the Senate that have served with those people, and they have long relationships, and they hope somehow the Democrat fever will break one day. And I think the president's view is it's not breaking. They're controlled by AOC. They're controlled by these guys like Mondani, and that's just where their base is, and they are just kind of following suit.
Do you see an end in sight for the shutdown?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to end eventually, right? I think it will. The president has done his best to mitigate damage to the American people. He has moved around money to pay the troops. He's moved around money to pay law enforcement. We are now figuring out the SNAP thing because we got two conflicting court rulings. Our lawyer's view was that we couldn't pay SNAP with the funds we have. We got two conflicting court rulings that said otherwise. The president requested a clarification. We got clarification over the weekend, so that process is in motion. But I mean, the important point here is the president has gone out of his way to try to make the shutdown painless for the American people. That's not something he had to do. It's because he's on their side. So there's a point at which he won't be able to do that anymore. There's not, infinite funds or authority.
I mean, if you had to put money on it, over under a week.
I'm not a betting man. What can I say?
No gambling for James Blair.
No.
You mentioned immigration. That's another issue that's top of mind for voters. Trump obviously believes really strongly that the actions he's taking now are fulfilling his promises and that it's what people want. After last night, looking at some of the exit polling, do you think there needs to be any sort of policy or messaging change on immigration?
Well, I mean, look, I think if you look at the immigration voters, I'm just checking the exit polls here, the Republicans overwhelmingly won people who immigration is their top problem, their top concern. But I do think that because the president has done such a good job on doing what he said and functionally closing the border first and foremost, and then starting to get the criminals out of the country, it has receded in the public consciousness of the most urgent thing to do. So there are less voters where that is top of mind too. And that is sort of when things are good, people don't worry about something as much. When people have concerns, that starts to pop to the top of what they're talking about. And again, I mean, people are saying that, it's sort of their personal feeling on the economy, and the Democrats won. Now, here's the good news for Republicans. Republicans in every poll are still trusted more than Democrats. The congressional Republicans, sort of generically, are trusted more than Democrats on the economy. The numbers where you want them to be by the midterms, they're not, but we think that can improve. But even all of this, they still trust Republicans generically more than they trust Democrats. But then the question becomes moving the generic out of the generic to the personal. So let's take Virginia. 48% of people say the economy is their top issue. The gubernatorial candidate functionally doesn't speak about it at all. 50% of their ads are about transgender issues, and then a smattering of other things.
Lessons learned.
In New Jersey, they're talking about the economy. Mickey Sherrill relentlessly focuses on costs. 75% of her ads are positive. She's saying, here's what I will do for New Jerseyans. Heavily focused on power costs, big issue in New Jersey. Now, listen, spending was a factor here too. They got outspent, 1.5 to 1 in, about 150% of ad spending in New Jersey.
It's going to be significantly different in midterms.
And it was 2 to 1 in Virginia. For Democrats, that's not going to be the case in the midterms.
One bright spot that Republicans tell me they saw last night is Zohran Mamdani's win. Operatives I talk to are basically salivating at the opportunity to paint him as the face of the Democratic Party. How big are you all going to go on Mamdani in the midterms?
Yeah, I think that the races in the midterms should be made about the candidates that we're running against. I don't think we're going to be running against Mamdani. I think we're going to be running against individual candidates in individual districts and individual races.
So you don't think we're going to see Mamdani splattered in a bunch of ads?
I think a lot of people will. Again, it will be up to their teams to sort of figure out whether or not they think that
You
works.
strategically don't think that's the right approach.
What I would tell you is that we will study it in the coming months. We'll see how he does. We'll see how people are reacting to him, and we will use whatever strategy and tactic the data tells us is the most effective. But what we do that we're very religious about is we talk to voters, we let them tell us things, and then we calibrate our strategy as a result of what they're telling us. There are many people who start with a thesis, and then they may torture their data advertently or inadvertently to fit their thesis. And we are pretty religious about doing it in the inverse order, which is how you should do it. You should look at the data, and then you should develop a strategy.
One Democrat that had a big win last night was actually Gavin Newsom, who pushed through the redistricting plan in the state. Do you think you all underestimated Newsom here? How do you size him up going into the midterms and, potentially a presidential?
I don't think we underestimated the electorate in California. It's not about Gavin Newsom. It's about the electorate in California. I think that we had a sense of what the numbers were going to be in that state, universal mail-in state, off your election. Again, the data sort of tells us where things are going. And there was some money spent and supported, but you do have to be a little bit brutal in your allocation of resources. Even though we have lots of money, we're going to allocate it well. That's very important. And the game is not over in California. I'm sure there will be litigation continuing. But I think the only thing I don't think we underestimated, but we could have hoped for, is that the California Supreme Court had a shred of honesty or dignity in its reading of the California Constitution. That whole scenario is unconstitutional under a plain language reading of California's Constitution and precedent in two different ways. And every challenge that was filed in advance was just immediately tossed. One-line orders, no thanks, is basically all it said. So there are judges that have on blue jerseys that do not care what their law says. They do not care what their Constitution says. They don't care what their voters said back then. They're just going to rubber stamp everything for Democrats. So that's something we have to contend with, and we will continue to calibrate accordingly.
Redistricting is something that Republicans are pushing for in a bunch of states as well. We know some of the states that it's already happened in or it's in the works in. Texas did it. Indiana, you all are pushing for. What other states do you want to see take this up?
We'll see what happens in each of those states, but I think it's really important to point out that Democrats have always done this. This is the first time Republicans fought back, and we commend them for fighting back. The Democrats are on their third round of litigation in Wisconsin to try to knock out 2 Republican seats that were drawn by a liberal governor on the orders of a liberal Supreme Court, to be clear. They've been tossed from court twice. They then spent $50 million on a Supreme Court race. In their fundraising materials, they said we can get 2 more seats this way. Then they filed more litigation. In Utah, they're winding towards the end of a case that's been running for 18 months, where they went to a liberal judge to knock out 2 Republican seats. That litigation will continue.
So where do you want to combat that?
Again, I think there's a lot of states out there talking about it, so we'll have to see how they all move. But I'll put it to you this way. I think on balance, Republicans will end up netting seats from the redistricting process.
How big of a priority is that for you?
I think that Republicans should take advantage of every tool they have in the tool chest that is legal to try to win elections, particularly when Democrats are doing that. They've never stopped doing that. This is nothing new.
On redistricting, what I hear from Democrats and Republicans is it's a terrible thing, but we got to do it because the other side is doing it. Do you agree that it's not like a great thing for democracy?
I would love it if Democrats would play by the rules, whether gentlemen's rules or actual rules. But you have Democrat judges who don't follow the law, not federally, not state. You have Democrats who impeach
Democrats would argue that Republicans also have judges that are wearing jerseys, right?
But it's not true. I don't know what that even means. They get slapped down in court constantly, and we continue to win. We continue to win at court. And by the way, let's just go back to what happened when the president wasn't out of office, right?
Was he out of office?
Was out of office.
Yeah.
The federal indictments, the lawfare, all of these things, like the toothpaste is out of the tube.
We're not going to go down that rabbit hole today. That'll
These are
be
just facts.
We'll save
And by
that
the way,
for another podcast.
Well, let's just be clear though. the American electorate already rendered its judgment on what they think of that. And they gave Trump the majority vote.
He won in 2024. I remember pretty vividly sitting in a briefing with you and Susie Wiles and Chris Lasavita in the sort of war room vibe, you guys walking us through the strategy that did work wonders in 2024 of getting out low propensity voters. You piloted it in Iowa and then you expanded it across the country. Um, it was super targeted. Where are you in that sort of war room scenario now? And is it a similar strategy where low propensity voters are the targets, or what's the sort of North Star for you guys now?
I mean, that is definitely sort of an underlying base that has to be achieved, which is raising the midterm engagement of those kind of presidential only voters. So in this case, they're low propensity now for the midterms, for sure. So that's sort of a baseline. Rising tide lifts all boats. And then every district will be a little bit different and they will vote on different things. But definitely, you have to have campaigns that are not out of the box.
What do you mean by that?
Not every race is the same and not every candidate is the same. They present different opportunities to, exploit to your candidate's advantage. And so you just have to sort of be aware of that. Generically, the generic environment matters, the national environment matters. So there is this stuff that's a baseline, just like turnout is a baseline. But again, each of those races will have to be fought against specific battle lines to sort of, in the close races, to sort of get their edge, to get enough to win. We are already studying that. We've been doing it for months. Our, whether it's at the RNC or sort of our outside groups, have been collecting data for many, many months in the swing states, building their targeting universes, listening to those voters, seeing how they're moving on what issues, so that when the time is right, they can be heavily, heavily focused on. We communicate with, the committees about those things. And I say the global we, obviously, sort of our external political people that do the campaigns. But, these guys, Tony and Tim Saylor and Chris Lasavita and the rest, they're already watching that very closely. They're sharing that with the committee. So I think you'll see a very sophisticated effort, particularly compared to years past, coming from the right.
You said recently that the President Trump is very aware of the historical trends that are working against Republicans for the 2026 midterms. How confident are you that you'll be able to change that trend?
Well, if I could guarantee anything in life, I'd be a rich man, right? So nothing's a guarantee, but I do think we have a good playbook, and as long as we execute it, we stand pretty good odds of being successful. He's aware of the trends. He actually talks about this publicly. I mean, he says, if you're having a successful presidency, I don't really know why voters vote against you. But he's aware of the, 2 times in the last 100 years about adding seats and those sorts of things. And he knows what we're up against, but, sort of accordingly, I think he will apply an equal recognition of that in what he actually does in terms of campaigning and resources.
How much does he want to get out there, like physically on the trail over the next year?
He does. And, I won't speak for when specifically that starts, but I think that by the time we're really in the heat of campaign season, you will see the Trump Roadshow in pretty full force.
Going back to the Trump rallies, packing my bags.
Well, don't break what, or don't fix what's not broken, right?
Before I let you go, I want to ask you to put yourself in the shoes of a Republican who wants to run for president in 2028. And let's put all the speculation aside. Just what lessons would you be taking from last night, and what would you be doing right now to put yourself in the best position?
I think if you're a Republican that wants to run in 2028 right now, you need to focus on keeping Republicans in power for 2026. I think the number one thing everybody can do is focus on the team and helping their team, and not focus on themselves. That's what they should be doing. Because frankly, I think that voters will sniff out anybody who is seen to be sort of focused on themselves, somehow separating themselves or whatever, and not the team. And it's a fool's errand anyway, to be honest with you. The country has, it's very, very polarized, for better or for worse. There's a group of people that have red jerseys on, and there's a group of people that have blue jerseys on, and the ones with the red jerseys are a little less inclined to vote, so that's a problem for us. It used to be the case for Democrats 10, 12 years ago, so these things just happen. You go through these cycles based on how your party's demographics are shifting. But then there's, a handful of people in the middle who move around if they vote at all, and those people aren't making up their mind for 2028 based on some separation you did in 2026, right? You have to focus on, if you want to be a 2028 candidate, you first better lock down your home. You better make sure that those people who put the jerseys on and you can rely on think you are on their team and you're going to look out for their interests.
All right, James, Blair, we could do this for so much longer, but I know you got a lot to go get done, so we appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks.
This has been The Conversation with Dasha Burns. We'll be back next week. If you want to catch future episodes of The Conversation, click that subscribe button below. Thanks for watching.